Even in a place like a park, there are mysterious stories to be found, no matter the size or appearance of the park, whether grand or small. Rundown or bursting with flowers, there's always a side hidden from the average visitor, accessible only to those who wander at night, or to park guards, like myself, and I have a tale to share with you. The park where I work as a guard is designed especially for romantic strolls, especially delightful during the nighttime hours. It's filled with lights, various beautiful decorations, an abundance of lovely flowers, and everything else to make couples enjoy their time together. Of course, to ensure safety, cameras are placed around the perimeter, but there are still blind spots. The cameras don't quite reach into the depths of the park, and the eastern part is covered with trees, making it impossible to see anything. And it's precisely there that this story unfolds. One lovely summer evening, while sitting in my guard shack, I alternated between glancing at my phone screen, where a series played, and the monitor. On one of the cameras, I noticed a couple. They seemed ordinary enough, except the girl was behaving a bit strangely. She would stop in front of the guy every time. He would just nod and gently push her aside, and she would return to him. Perhaps they were arguing about something or whatever. Naturally, like everyone else who saw them, I didn't think much of it. About an hour passed. I grew tired of watching the series, and decided to take a nap. Due to the heat, I opened the window, letting a gentle cool breeze into the shack. Just as I closed my eyes and drifted into the realm of dreams, I was jolted awake by a scream. Sleep fled from me instantly as I looked at the monitor. After scanning all the cameras, I found no cause for the scream, yet somehow, the thought crept into my mind that it was probably the couple who had been in the eastern part of the park. They didn't pay me just for show. I had to go check it out. I was a bit apprehensive about what might have happened to warrant such a scream. Normally, everything in the park was always calm, especially incidents like murders and the like were unheard of. Arriving at the presumed location of the scream, I noticed a lone silhouette of a girl. With her head bowed, she covered her face with her palms. Sobbing loudly, she stood by 3 trees, wearing a light dress shirt, her hair swaying in the breeze. "Miss, are you okay?" As soon as I spoke, she sharply looked up at me with large, tear-filled eyes. Her entire face was red, wet, and her nostrils flared from heavy breathing. She looked as if she were possessed. With light steps, she began to walk away, while I stood there, rooted to the spot. It was only when she disappeared from view that I came to my senses. It was a very strange scene, one that kept me from sleeping afterwards. I replayed that moment in my head for a long time. The girl came to the park several more times, sitting for long periods in the eastern part before leaving late in the evening. I watched her, ostensibly making rounds. She simply gazed at the trees, squinting, quickly rubbing her hands. Perhaps it was her way of calming down. I figured they had broken up, had a big fight, and that's why she screamed in distress. It was unfortunate, but there was nothing I could do to help in such matters. I could approach and talk, but what could an ordinary guard do? Besides, she had probably already told everything to her friends. This went on for about a month. The girl now looked happier, continuing to come to the park, meditating among the trees. Somehow, she seemed a bit better, which strangely eased my mind. End of August approached. Autumn was slowly creeping in, making the park a bit gloomier, yet it didn't lose its romantic charm. On one of the last days of August, the girl came again, this time with a rather heavy bag. Someone even offered to help her, but she refused. It made me slightly wary, but I reassured myself with the thought that maybe she had decided to have a picnic or something, and her friends were about to arrive, but no one came, and she didn't leave the park. So, I calmed myself, thinking she just decided to spend the night in the park. She brought a tent and everything else. Why? Of course, but my simple kindness decided not to bother her. It was my fatal mistake. The next morning, a commotion erupted in the park. In the eastern part of the park, on one of the trees, A girl was found hanging in a white wedding dress. Investigations began. Suspects were sought. I was questioned by the police. They reviewed the surveillance footage and left. I followed the events. Local news constantly discussing the dead bride. It was quickly resolved. The girl had taken her own life due to unrequited love. It's banal, yes, but in life it's terrifying when young people deprive themselves of life, whether they're girls or boys. Moreover, it all happened long before the wedding, but the groom found someone else, and the rumors about her being pregnant didn't help. While observing her, I didn't notice her slight protruding belly. They dealt with the groom as well, but the situation took such a turn that he followed his bride, jumping in front of a train. After that incident, many called him a murderer. He decided to atone for his guilt that way, life for a life. It turned out to be a tragic story, and for some reason, I felt partially sick myself, which made me indulge a bit. Thankfully, I don't go wild when I'm drunk, so I calmly went to work and carried on living. Friends and colleagues were understanding. I'm quite a sensitive person. In short, my first story ends on such a tragic note. This story happened long after the incident with the dead bride. It was early January, in the middle of the Christmas holidays, right on the eve of Christmas. So there I am, in the little room, slightly hungover from early morning, music playing softly, and I'm trying to make out something on the monitor. The lighting doesn't transmit well through the cameras. I kept seeing things, shadows and such, which made me wonder, was I hallucinating or not? It all started because of one silhouette, darting along the cleared paths of the park, so fast that my blurry eyes couldn't catch up. With great difficulty, I managed to focus on the runner. I thought, maybe just an early morning jogger, decided to get some exercise on a winter morning. Only it was odd how lightly dressed he was for the cold, just a sweater and baggy pants, scarf trailing behind him like two tails, and a fluffy Ashanka hat. How was he not freezing? The thought flickered in my mind. You'd think he'd be toughened up. I continued to watch him. The runner circled the park for about half an hour until he suddenly stopped by one of the cameras. Wobbling, he tried to hit the camera with snowballs, but kept missing. Realizing his attempt failed, he decided to climb the pole, but the metal was too slippery. Then he tried to jump up, still couldn't reach. I watched in puzzlement, not understanding what the camera had done to thwart him. He kept jumping in place, waving his arms in the air, until he finally fell after another attempt. He sprawled on the path, and I quickly gathered myself and headed towards him. The runner was still lying there, mumbling something in his language, occasionally waving his hand. I pulled out a flashlight and shone the beam directly on him. No reaction. "Hey, are you alive?" I leaned towards him, trying to shine the light on his face. He suddenly grabbed my hand, causing the flashlight to slip from my palm, and gave me a strange look. His face resembled a devil's. Wide grin, sharp facial features, and a nose angled like a beak in the right light and shadows played a cruel trick on me. Only devils don't make you nauseous with the sharp smell of alcohol. I tried to pull my hand away, but he held on so tightly, I thought he might break my wrist. With my free hand, I managed to reach the flashlight and hit him on the head, after which the grip loosened, and I managed to break free. I immediately rushed towards my little room. The alcohol in me dissipated instantly. Safe inside, I locked the door and recoiled, searching for that guy through the cameras. Couldn't find him anywhere. I held my breath. Footsteps echoed. That guy followed me, banging on the door and window, roaring like a bear. I got scared, immediately called the police, watching as the drunk stranger tried to break in. While explaining everything to the dispatcher, that creepy guy seemed to calm down. Listening closely, I somehow thought he'd left, but as luck would have it, a thick, brown substance flew through the window. That idiot started throwing his excrement into the room, laughing wildly. Like a lunatic, he pressed his bare buttocks against the window and smeared his own feces on the glass. I sat there and prayed for the police to arrive as quickly as possible, continuing to watch this disgusting show. During this time, the drunkard managed to vomit under my door, curse everything and everyone, throw his excrement into the room several more times, and laugh. Clearly, he was having a blast, while I trembled in fear. 20 minutes later, 2 burly figures in police uniforms took the troublemaker away. He cursed me and them, called on God for help, and spewed other nonsense, claiming he was the son of Jesus, the brother of the Virgin Mary, and had his own angelic harem. After that incident, I quit drinking, afraid I might go mad just like him. Suddenly, a man started spending nights in the park, rough-looking, in wrinkled clothes and with a very long beard, reminiscent of Old Man Hottopic. He showed up during the May holidays, and at first, we thought he was just some drunkard, but later we found out he was homeless. He was coherent, didn't bother or bite anyone, just sat somewhere off to the side and drank. We took pity on him and didn't chase him away. Sometimes he slept in my shed, but his main resting place was in the eastern part of the park, as mentioned before, where there were plenty of trees and other vegetation. He settled in among the bushes, constructing something resembling a tent out of makeshift materials. We called the man Boris. He talked a lot about himself, how he had aspired to become an electronics engineer since childhood, how he studied for that profession, built a career and a life, even received prestigious awards. In short, he made a name for himself, showcasing his talents to the whole country, and it could have continued further. Many would have heard of Boris Alexandrovich by now, if it hadn't been for vodka and bad company dragging him down. Until he was 30, he never went out drinking, never chased after women, he just worked and studied. He decided to celebrate his jubilee in a special way by partying hard. At that time, he had a fiancée, a beautiful athlete who practiced ballet, and she didn't particularly like this idea. But sometimes you can't stop friends, and Boris valued friendship, just not with those people. He celebrated his jubilee grandly, and that's when his life of revelry began. His fiancée was about to give birth, but Boris wasn't ready for that commitment. This caused her to leave him. They continued to be on and off for a long time until they completely stopped communicating. Boris lived in a rented apartment for a while, but he was kicked out for non-payment. All the money went to alcohol, and that's how he started his journey as a homeless person. At that time, he was around 45 to 50 years old, but due to heavy drinking, he looked like an old man. It was astonishing that he was still alive, standing firmly on his feet. It was a typical domestic story, something you could often see and hear. But what slightly scared me about him was that he often said he was watching over his beloved. He talked about his daughter, how she was born, so beautiful like a princess. Now a teenager, he approached her often, tried to engage in conversation, but his unkempt appearance frightened the girl away, and she always pushed him away. His former fiancée also scared him off, but Boris didn't lose hope. He continued to watch over them, especially his daughter. He regretted that due to one mistake, he couldn't be with her now. If it weren't for my stupidity and vodka, he often muttered to himself, I would be with Katya now. Boris constantly referred to his daughter as Katya, as if she were his friend or lover. One could say he was expressing paternal love, like his conscience was eating away at him. So he tried to make amends. But Boris often swore that he wanted to spend a night with his daughter, to lie in the same bed. I won't go into detail. I'll just say that his love was somewhat twisted in another sense. Again, I'm not paranoid to be alarmed by every word or action. Alcohol had clouded his judgment, and he was talking nonsense. Perhaps he truly felt remorse. I started to worry when Boris began to behave strangely, especially when his daughter appeared in the park. He looked like a vulnerable lover, trying to win back his beloved. He kept falling to his knees, begging, reaching out to her, throwing tantrums, which often required my intervention. His behavior began to frighten me, and every time he showed up in the park, I chased him away, almost kicking him. Then he started to attack me too, and one day he managed to bite my hand. Soon, Boris stopped coming to the park altogether. I breathed a sigh of relief. Now the park will be peaceful, I thought, but I was very wrong about that. A rather horrifying event involving Boris and his daughter occurred. It was already evening, late autumn, and I was sipping tea in my shed. Glancing at the monitor, there appeared Katya. She often walked with her friends in the park in the evening after school. I was monitoring her group, and although Boris hadn't shown up for a long time, his absence concerned me, and that evening turned out to be fateful. When Katya and her friends found themselves in the center of the park, stopping near the fountain, Boris suddenly popped out. He literally appeared abruptly from the side, pushed the girls aside, and lunged at his daughter, knocking her into the empty fountain. I instantly burst out of the hut and rushed to help. A crowd of onlookers gathered around the fountain. 2 men started to rescue the poor girl. Someone was already calling the police and an ambulance. Katya's friends stood nearby, tears in their eyes, watching what was happening. I pushed through the crowd to join the rescue, but Katya managed to extricate herself. With her pants down, her jacket torn, and her shirt partially ripped, she stood with a stone in her hand next to her father. Boris lay lifeless, blood trickling from his head onto the stone floor of the fountain, mixing with puddles from the recent rain. The father had just attempted to rape his daughter. Throughout it all, his conscience was not troubled, only a lascivious desire for copulation. Then everything was passed off as self-defense. I do not know the further fate of Katya and her mother, nor do I want to think about why Boris wanted to do such a thing to his daughter. After this incident, I became more vigilant towards various suspicious individuals.